is don't, because the guy that wrote that doesn't fish in the winter. So, and I've said this a million times, and the first thing I want to let you know, the number one key to cold weather bass fishing, and whether it's smallmouth, largemouth, and actually you'll find this holds true with all fish, but we're talking primarily about bass fishing here. You're looking for trends in the weather. I've said this 1,000, 10,000 times, and it gets overlooked. You're looking for stable weather. Had a great conversation with one of our regular customers and a really good river fisherman, by the way, today. He's like, I'm not going out till the water hits 50. I don't want to work for him. I don't care what you say. You got to show me pictures. I'm like, I don't have to show you nothing. I'm just telling you how it is. You can go out there and whack them right now. Well, my buddies were out last Saturday, and they're pretty good fishermen, and they didn't catch anything. Well, guess what? Last Saturday wasn't even day one of a weather trend. In the cold weather, you shouldn't have caught much last Saturday. In the winter, in the early winter, in the midwinter, in the late winter, the first day after stable weather that you have a cold front is the worst. And if you got up early last Saturday to come to work like I did, or to go fishing, the frost was on the pumpkin, and it wasn't like today. Today is day 3 of stable weather. Okay, so the third day is you're going to crush them. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters other than that third day of stable weather. If you get a fourth day, it's even better yet. And I will promise you that tomorrow you can go out on the Susquehanna River with a couple of these techniques, or you can go to the upper Chesapeake Bay with a couple of these techniques, or you can go to your favorite lake, and the lake will not fish as good as those other bodies of water because they're a shallow water fishery and their water's moving. But you won't have that kind of success. You'll catch fish, but you can slay fish. If you guys came in and said, man, we went up on the river and caught 75 smallmouth, it was a great day, I'm going to be like, that's awesome. That is great. We went down to the upper bay and we caught 15 or 20 huge largemouth. Let me tell you, that's as good as it gets on the upper bay. You know what I mean? You got to evaluate your day by the body of water you're on. So I like, you got to agree with that.
Yeah. You know, first of all, you know, thanks guys for coming. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody from YouTube. We're taking the YouTube thing here today. So thanks you guys for stopping by. You know, this is just a kind of round table with me and George today. We got our audience here. They're going to ask some questions, you know, throughout the day. That's really what this is about. It's about asking questions and talking about some of the stuff that we're talking about here. You guys can really fire some questions that, you know, if you have anything, any kind of question with anything, that's what it's all about. But go with what George is saying. You know, where we're at right now is, you know, like me and him, whenever you can go fishing is a great day of fishing. You know, it's just whenever you can go, that's number one. But, you know, if you have to pick your days and plan your days, and what George is saying about following the weather very strictly and very closely is very, very important. And then you have those magical days, you know, and you can really have a better shot at those magical days. And that's what we do a lot. So,
in case you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm getting out how I'm going to start on a very cold winter day to get started and see what mood these fish are in. A couple things that I really rely on.
And that's the way we do. That's what we do. We get in the water. Me and George will launch the boat, get in the water, and then we start to put things together.
You got to get your conditions.
You know,
what's my water color? Is like if I was fishing tomorrow, I would launch my boat. Probably
no.
Ford Hunter.
No.
I would run up the river, and then I would turn and I would run the whole ways across the river as I was going up, and I'm looking at the water color. Okay? By the time I get up there, I'm going to know what my east water looks like, what my center water looks like, and what my west water looks like. And depending on what that is, I might eliminate 1 or 2/3 of the river to start.
And you're just, that's just the drive from the boat ramp to
That's just driving.
where we think
Every
where we
second
might
you're
start.
gathering data.
Yeah.
Okay? If I was on the Upper Bay, launching out of Anchor Marine, do a little tidal water bass fishing tomorrow, first thing I would do is I was warming my motor up and getting out of the no wake, because I'd look around, be looking at my water temperature as I zig from one side to the other, looking at my water color, bump it up on plane at the no wake buoy. I'd run down maybe halfway to the mouth of the bay, because I haven't been there in a while. Last year was high, dirty, dingy, ugly. I want to see what that looks like. So I'm going to do my loop. Again, I'm eliminating or choosing. So, it's been cold. Yes, today's warmed up, but last Saturday, it was real cold. The guys were talking about how tough it was. Under those circumstances, you want to fish finesse baits. And some of the stuff that we've been on, of course, everybody knows what the Ned rig is. I mean, it's year-round lethal. It's probably the single greatest cold weather bait I've ever fished with for smallmouth. It's phenomenal for largemouth.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We always talk smallmouth, on the Ned rig, because a lot of guys are really keyed on that, but it's a great largemouth.
Phenomenal.
It's just a great largemouth.
The only difference I do when I'm fishing largemouth, particularly local, we have such big fish. At Upper Bay, you're subject to catching 5 or 6 pound fish every trip. I use a little more hook than that. This is the standard Z-Man Shroom's head. When I get down there in that heavier duty fish, I want that heavier hook. I don't know if I have any in here, but I want the here we go, the Ned locks. And the deal with the Ned locks is it's got a heavier wire. The other circumstance where I've run into needing this head was last early fall in that real high river water. We did some graphing and found some fish in some wintering holes, and we were thinking we would try them. The current was very strong, and those fish were magnified in that current. It was like catching giants, and they were flexing these hooks open on us, and we were losing them. That's what happens on your lighter wire. You hook a big fish, and the hook flexes and opens up. You lose that fish, but you don't know it because the hook pops back into its shape. Whereas going up a wire thickness to a 2X version of this, it's a good Mustad hook.
That's a Mustad 7.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
They
it's a nice hook. It's a nice stout hook.
They have a really unique keeper on there for the Z-Man plastics, because they're special kind of plastics, stretchy. You can't get them on just any keeper. So that Ned locks, I always like to have a little bit of that stuff in my box. When I'm largemouth fishing, I very, very rarely will go below 1/6 of an ounce.
Especially because we do a lot of tide water fishing, so you got the movement of the tide.
Yeah.
And normally we want a vertical presentation.
Yeah.
When we're largemouth fishing.
If we're on a dock piling or in a marina on a piling, those fish are nosed into that. When you picture that piling, that fish is nosed into that. If it's 6 feet deep and you cast your bait right next to the piling, by the time it gets to the bottom, you're behind the fish. So that heavier bait and the proper fall pendulum, that bait wants to pendulum, so you follow it with the rod, make your cast. You always end up with a high rod, and you follow down, and that bait falls like this. Whereas if you cast in and you leave a little bit of tension on the line, that bait's going to pendulum towards you. If that fish is sitting here, the guy right behind you who's putting the correct presentation on is the one that's going to catch the fish behind you. So you got to keep that in mind. That's why that little bit of heavier head.
Jordan, for the heavier heads, do they have any with weed guards on them?
This particular brand does not. There is another good option for that, and I use it a lot. And it's made by Owner.
It's like the owner finesse head.
It's like a Texas rigging deal.
Cause you know from fishing the upper bay, pilings and all,
Yeah.
last time there's ropes down there,
Yeah.
bubbling
Oh, it's
system
terrible.
pipes.
It's terrible. That place down there is horrible with
Yeah.
that. So
Snag Haven.
we go to
Like,
The sport is sport.
we go to that.
I don't like to run out of jig heads.
We go to that owner head, and it's like a slider head. For the guys over on YouTube, it's a slider style head, but it's real small. It has a number 1 hook for your small baits, for your small little Ned baits. That works good for your small finesse baits. You know, in that cold water, you know, where you or in that situation where you're worried about getting hung up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
'cause
I'm out of those
We
right now.
use a lot of weedless heads. Me and George are a lot different than a lot of our friends that fish with us. They don't like to use weedless anything. You know, for us, it's all about keeping the bait in the water for the longest period of time.
Yeah.
You know, and if you have to stop and retie,
Right.
you're not in the water. And I'm telling you, at the end of the day, that's 50 casts
Yeah.
or 100 casts, depending on how long a day you fish. You know.
Plus with a weed guard, you don't feel hesitant as much. to throw
Exactly.
into
You're not
it, so-
afraid to throw
Yeah.
and make that cast.
Yeah, you got to put your bait where the fish live.
Yeah, and you're not afraid to make that cast. So that's why we always preach a weed guard. I mean, yeah, 1 out of 25 or 30 fish, it might come unbuttoned because your wire did something, and to create that fish from coming off. But you know what? You never would have thrown it in there anyway to try to get that, and you never would have got that bite.
Right.
So you know, I take the chances on that, and we're catching fish nobody else is catching because we use that weed guard.
Yeah, you got to get in. You got just like our tube fishing. This is sort of a branch off of this, but it's on this topic right here. We fish our tube with a weed guard.
The Oldham jig. Is that
No, this is an SFT jig.
Oh, is it?
That's
Looks like the Oldham.
that's a special one there.
This is the SFT. Any tubes here?
I used to use the
Looks just
Oldham,
like an Oldham.
Oldham jigs,
Yeah, it
looks just like
an
that,
Oldham.
yeah. And they work great.
So what you have here is you have SFT tube
Little
head.
weed guard on there.
It's got and we've experimented with these wires, and you can't go any thicker or any thinner. And basically, when you rig that, you're going to rig your wire. You're going to work your wire up inside your tube there. This tube's all knotted up like that, and you want to sort of punch your wire, and then work your tube head up in there. And the eye of your tube is going to come out where you punch that wire. And then what you want to do with this wire is you want to flex it a couple times. You want to flex it back and forth and soften it, weaken it, and then just hook it. If some of the wires are a little long, I go behind the barb. If they're just right, I put them right in front of the barb. If they're just behind the barb, I bend them a little bit to arc them so they end up in front of the barb. You want to be noticeably behind the barb or in front of the barb, not right on the barb.
Yeah, they hang up.
And that allows you to put that tube into any form of cover, and it cuts down on on rock fishing, it cuts down on 80 or 90% of your snags. And when you do get hung, if you use the correct boomerang technique to pop it, you can knock that thing loose most of the time, and a lot of times you'll get bit after you pop that thing free. It's because that fish is looking at it. You're in his living room, and he like, I know that's there. You know, so
And then on your Ned head, we used, you know, the weedless Ned head, which I'm telling you, off the river just saves so much of.
Game changer.
It's just a game changer. And but you can see George likes to really spread his out and give you more of a Y. I don't do that as much. I kind of keep mine together. I think I can throw in the more.
yeah, when they come
Some
out
more
of the pack,
structure.
these two wires are together like that,
Yeah, I like to keep mine together.
and you can actually keep them together like Mike's saying.
Yeah,
I like to spread mine out a little bit.
yeah, he likes his spread out, so that's the way I like to fish mine, a little bit closer. It might spread out a little bit, but it's pretty close. I think I don't get hung up near as much. I don't think with that. A little bit stiffer. And then depending on the cover you're throwing in.
That tube head has a heavier hook in too.
Ours don't.
The
We
one you passed around did.
we mold ours
Yeah,
on a 570 Eagle Claw
That's a
or
fine
the
wire.
equivalent of a Mustad. We mold about 100,000 at a time. So if my guys got a shortage on 570s, we use the equivalent Mustad, and I can't remember that number, but they're standard wire bronze tube head.
I want the one that you passed has a black chrome.
I don't think that one does. It might look like it does.
I mean,
That might have caught. That
I
might
don't know
have
how
caught
that
you.
would have happened unless he accidentally had one mixed in with a bag of 1,000 hooks, and that happens to be the one out of 1,000.
They
But we've been molding this head for
So you're using,
25
you're
years.
using the standard jig.
standard jig head, and the reason we do that is keep the cost down because you're going to lose jig heads, and fishing the Susquehanna River. I mean, you can lose a lot of jig heads,
The
but
black nickel heads, like the Mustad head, you know, you're tripling the price of the jig.
Yeah, if you go to
Yeah.
that sound.
You know, and these are
That's-
already $50 a hundred. So I don't think you want to spend
the
$150.
nice thing about this hook too is it sharpens really easy. So you can dull it up and it sharpens really easy. And I tell you, we catch giants on this thing. We caught 5 and 6 pound smallies
Size
on
eight.
this head.
You use it
So
8 ounce.
8 ounce.
Well, we can get into that conversation. That's a great conversation, and I always like to talk that conversation because in our box we carry 8, 3/16, quarter, and 3/8 and half because depending on the currents, you
and the
know,
wind.
and the wind. The wind's a big issue. Depending on the currents, man, you gotta be able to put that bait and present that bait the same way you would as if there was no wind and you were throwing an 1/8 ounce. You need to have that same presentation. So if you're not hitting the bottom, and all you have is the 8, you're kind of out of luck. Now we'll step up to the 3/16, see how that goes, and if that really doesn't even do, then we'll go to a quarter. And there's been times where he'll make that adjustment, and all of a sudden he'll start popping fish, and I'm like, okay, now I need to make that adjustment, and I'll go ahead and make that adjustment, and then we kind of dial into that. Whether it's a wind or current, I mean, a lot of times wind is just
Well,
mess
and,
your
and
drift
the
up,
fisherman
something
will. I mean, each fisherman has his own level of feel. And, you know, when you're doing this type of finesse fishing, be it some sort of a Ned presentation, or a tube, or a hair jig, you know, anything in that finesse spinning rod presentation where you're fishing 8-pound line or even 6-pound line. You know, if you have a little bit of a problem with your feel or a little bit of a problem with your hook set where you're not comfortable, a great modification that you can make to your presentation is to go to a spinning reel that is spooled with braid. And then top it off with a leader. And what's nice about that is the versatility. You know, like the last trip him and I fished, it was, the water temperature was in the low 30s, and it was cold. 6-pound test gets a lot more bites than 8-pound test. So if you don't have a spool of 6, but you got a spool of braid, you get out your 6-pound fluorocarbon and put an 8 or 10 foot piece of 6 on there, and you now have 6. You want to go to 8? 10 seconds later, you got 8. So it gives you a lot of versatility, but there's no stretch here, so your feel goes way up, and your hook set power is quadrupled or more. So if you're not feeling it, you know, and if you're fishing in 25 or 30 mile an hour winds, I think that last day we fished was gusting to 40. And when you were in that wind, you were here, your jig was there, and your line was over there.
Well, I think that's one of the things we were throwing there, and that's a heavy 1/6.
Yeah. We were fishing 4 foot of water, and we had to go to a 6 ounce.
Just to hold the
The
bottom.
middle of the river was clear, and that deal color TRD was money, and we throttled them on that thing. The west bank was pretty dirty. The east bank was downright mud. All we would do is jump over there and switch over to black. And I was either fishing the flatworm from Berkeley Mac Scent or the Z-Man, what do you
Crawl.
call that? TRD
TRD
craws,
hogs.
hogs
In black.
in black. And you couldn't get bid on that deal. You could be
Yeah.
25 yards that way, and the river was clean and beautiful, and you couldn't get bid on black.
Yeah.
You crushed them on the deal. You went over to that mud water. The water temperature jumped up 5 degrees, but
it was
no one was fishing the mud except for 2 people.
And
3, because we had 3 people in the boat.
Yeah, and funny thing was, I was in the back, and George was in the middle, and our buddy was up front. And, well, Corbin, you guys all know Corbin. And George happened to have that black hogs on. And
TRD hog.
yeah, and I had a black TRD, finesse TRD. And Corbin was throwing some kind of, like, I don't know, half-ounce jig and pig with, Corbin. He just starts out with this crazy stuff. And he starts pounding these fish. I mean, you couldn't see the water. The water color was colors of those boxes.
It was mud.
I mean, it was mud.
We pulled up and said 5 minutes and we're gone. But
Yeah.
we wanted it's a winter hole. It's a bank winter hole.
Yeah. There's fish
And
are there in a
we're
way.
like, listen, 5 minutes, we're out of here. Well, within 5 minutes, I had 2 4-pounders in the boat.
The biggest fish.
But you had to have that different profile and that dark color.
Now, here's the other thing about that. When we got over there, the water temperature was 3 degrees warmer.
No, it was about 5 degrees.
Or was
warmer.
it 5 degrees
Yeah.
warmer? It was a lot warmer.
It jumped right up. So we
And
looked at the temp gauge and we're like, "Ooh, it's encouraging."
way warmer. But it was so muddy, we were like, well, that could be the
Well, there was a
deal
big
breaker.
creek feeding in right above us, and that creek was rolling mud. And this winter hole was formed by a big scrubby island peninsula coming off the shore, and the water was running through it, so it was breaking that current. And the winter hole was just a bank eddy.
We need Joe G.
But the river was so
Serious?
high last year that the fish wintered on the shoreline.
Of course.
In most places, they didn't go to winter holes. They had 4 or 5 foot of water where they were, and they had a well-defined eddy, and that's just where they stayed. And where you found one, you found many. So it was an oddball year. You didn't fish according to plan. But the other,
George, how about the size of these? Does size change through the seasons of your lure? It looks like everything's kind of
Radically.
3 inches or so.
we're talking cold water right here.
Yeah, okay.
In the warmer months, for example, smallmouth fishing, I will do my level-headed best to not touch anything on this table, with the exception of my fluke. I do not try to ever fish a spinning rod with any finesse bait on it whatsoever in the warmer water. I think you're fishing for numbers and not size. I think you're much better off power fishing in those scenarios. Jerk baits, spinner baits, chatter baits, crank baits, moving stuff that you're causing a reactive strike. But when you're in colder 30, 40 degree water, a lot of that's not an option. There is one bait that crosses over to cold water, and it's totally dependent upon your retrieve, and that's jerk bait. Suspending jerk bait, and the colder the water, the more attention you need to pay to that suspending factor. You want that bait in high 30s and low 40s. You want that bait, when you pop that bait, you want that bait to pop and just sit there. You don't want it to rise. You don't want it to sink. Toom, toom. And if you need to fine tune that, you may have to put a little, like if you pop that thing down alongside the boat, you may have to put a little suspend dot underneath the chin.
They're in our other box.
I don't have any in this box, but it's basically a lead decal, a little disc of lead that we will put under the chin of the bait right here, if that bait's rising up on us. Now, as the water gets warmer, you'll want that little bit of a rise. See, water changes density with different temperatures, so your bait's not going to suspend the same at every water temperature. Okay? In warmer water, your bait's going to rise up a little bit. In colder water, that bait that you suspended in 42 degree water is going to sink in 35 degree water. So you got to pay attention to that.
A lot of those guys are, like you said, which is size of baits, that changes a lot with the water temperature. You'll go bigger and bigger as sometimes go bigger and bigger. However, smallies, on the river, you can do fairly well with like the TRD hogs or the you know, the regular TRD finesse worm. You can do fairly well and catch
And
big,
largemouth.
and catch big fish with those little baits. But you know, until that water hits 40, 42, 44, 45, right in that area, you know, you really have to kind of stay with this little stuff. I mean, to get the bites. After that, you can kind of get into finesse, jig and pig, swim jigs, chatterbaits. You know, that all that bigger stuff. Start the 3.5-inch tube will kick in like 50 degree temperature. Then we start throwing the 3.5-inch tube a lot more. You know, as that water warms up, and it's more of a something more that they're going to look at and bite. Right now, they're you know, there's big bait around, but they don't want the big bait right now. They're just trying to get something just for that particular day. They're just trying to pick something up, something that's coming by, whether it's an insect or a little minnow. They're just kind of sucking it in. They don't have to do a lot for it. They don't have to do any chasing. You know, the smaller stuff usually hangs around the rocks where they're at and just comes down to them or whatever, and they can suck it in real quick. And that's what kind of feeding that goes on this time of year. That's why you don't see them busting shit out of the water. You don't have the energy for that, you know. So that's not until the water warms up and that happens.
Well, you got to pay attention to your daily like surroundings, what's going on. For example, on the Susquehanna, in February and March, and even in April, on a day like today, you'll get a late morning, afternoon bite. That is
Joey, say hi to all our YouTube friends.
Hey, how you doing?
This is Joey G, our really guy.
I gotta get it real.
you'll get, if you pay attention, especially when you're river fishing, and here's a nugget for you. I guarantee you, most of you have never heard this before. And you can go out there and ask Go-Go about this one. I took him fishing the day after this sale last year. And it was cold. I mean cold. My boat was frozen to the trailer. I mean, everything was frozen. I was frozen. Go-Go, he's from Puerto Rico. He looked like he was wrapped up. Man, he wasn't cut out for this. But we get up there on the river, and it's cold. It's tough. We're dragging Ned rigs. We're dragging everything we got here. All the magic. And we're catching a couple fish, and that's it. Go-Go caught a turtle. And then I looked, and there was a caddisfly crawling on. Will Hollis was fishing with us. He had a light colored jacket on. There was caddisfly crawling up his back of his jacket. And I'm like, oh, we're about to start catching some fish. So pay attention in February and March when that sun's beating on that bank and the caddisflies start like on your face and you're like buggy. The smallmouth will exclusively feed on them.
Yeah, they love them.
I reached in the bag.
Grab the
I
head
grabbed out I actually grabbed out a TRD hog. And they didn't have black back then. The darkest color I had, which was whatever, California craw or whatever. And I think I caught like 7 fish on the same bank we couldn't get bit on all morning.
Should have went to the hair jig. You would have really liked them.
Well, I'll tell you, good thing you said that. Young Will Hollis was fishing with me, and he dug that hair jig out and caught a couple on that. And then Go-Go switched over to a standard TRD and caught a few on that. And if you pay attention on smallmouth waters on the river, if you pay attention to those caddisflies, that pattern is true all the ways up to the spawn. And Mike can tell you about a very unique, if you want to go off the beaten trails here for a second, he'll tell you about a very unique pattern that you never heard of that occurs with these caddisflies. Tell them about that, about the splash it.
Oh yeah.
Tell them about throwing a popper in March.
Yeah. Well, that happens. Like it's pre-spawn. It's a pre-spawn pattern, and it's just before they go on. Well, it could be a post-spawn pattern too, but it's before the big hatches start coming off, and it's caddis, and it's another It's not a white fly. It's not a mayfly. It's another
It's
type
a
of
teeny
it's a
tiny
tiny
little
little
mayfly.
white thing that comes off, and you'll
The
see
fly fishermen would know what they're called.
you'll see one going off, and then you'll see
We
another.
call white ones and black
Yeah.
ones black ones.
Yeah,
You know?
so we don't know what kind of flies,
Ticos, tricos,
what kind of
micos,
flies they
whatever.
are, but you'll see them.
They're little.
There's not like millions of them. They're not crawling in your ears. But there'll be 2 or 3 on your boat, sitting on your boat, and there might be, guy's shoulder might have 1 or 2. But if you look at the water really close, you'll see these little dimples. And I always thought they were, little minnows and bluegills coming up and grabbing one of them flies off, because that's literally how big that little depression is on the water. It's a little like a suck, and then down it goes. And we just got on this splash it, but to splash it with the feathers on the back, and
Gotta have the feathers.
gotta have the feathers. They gotta be nice white ones. And you throw
Like
it.
this.
We threw it out. We throw it out, and we splash, but real subtle. It's like splash, and you just kind of dead stick it, let it go, let it go,
It's
let
like
it
you're
go.
drifting a dry fly.
Let it go, and you might just kind of get their attention a little bit with a little bit of movement again, give them a look. I always thought they just, so they would see it, and just let it go, and all of a sudden it would just be like a little, and you set the hook.
It's a giant.
It was like,
Okay.
oh my gosh!
Doesn't happen
This thing,
every day.
Giants would come out of the water,
It's
and you would
unique
swear.
circumstances.
You would swear it was a bluegill or a minnow sucking that thing off the surface, and they just open their mouth and suck that bait in
But it's a repeatable pattern that we've been using for
years.
a decade.
Yeah,
Or
and,
more.
And there again, the only way you know it's going to happen is being on the water, and then you're there, and you're throwing all this other stuff, and you're catching fish, and you just got to keep an eye out to your surroundings, and that's that's the thing about what we do, and what we want to teach more than anything is fish your gut. Just fish the day, fish what's going on, look around, see what's happening, pay attention. I mean, it's nature. You're not dealing with some kind of a computer here. This is nature. This is something we can figure out.
How many times are you fishing and you're not doing real well, and you're largemouth fishing on a lake or on the upper bay, or your Susquehanna smallmouth fishing, and you're like, man, I should go over on that bank and fish spinnerbait down that bank, and you don't. Maybe you're just tired, or maybe you're just like, you don't have any confidence in what you're doing, or that's how you learn these little things.
Mhm.
Like I used to never, years ago, I would never think that in December you would catch them on the bank on a spinnerbait. And in one year, in December, we had a big rise on the river, and we were catching fish in wintering areas to the point where some days it would get boring, and we would go somewhere else just to find some place where we didn't catch like 100 fish a day. And the river rose up, and we're like, you know what, those fish ought to be up on the bank. You wouldn't think so. It's December, the water's like 40, and it was unbelievable.
Help them.
So, always trust your gut instinct. Most of the time it's going to probably be wrong, but it is. It is. You're going to tie a lot of knots.
Wait a second.
That's
Did you
fishing.
just say that?
Yeah,
He just said that. Did you guys catch that?
most of the time. You're going to tie you're going to burn a lot of gas, you're going to out, but every now and again you're going to learn about
Brutal honesty.
smallmouth sipping on caddisflies. You're going to learn about all kinds of things, and it's everywhere we go. We have this philosophy,